John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com covers the Eagles as well as the NFL nationally. John, how you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
So, John, I wanted to start with Nolan Carroll. The Eagles re-signed him a one-year deal this morning, just under $3 million. Can you talk a little bit about what you think went into that deal? Because we know Nolan Carroll met with the Cowboys last week, but then this morning he tweeted out his Instagram picture that he is back with the Eagles.
Yeah, I think that kind of spurred some action because the Eagles were interested in bringing him back, and he was one of the guys that Howie Roseman had earmarked to get done before free agency started. But he wanted, obviously, a team-friendly deal. And Nolan, remember, was playing pretty well. Was probably the Eagles' best cornerback last season before he broke his ankle on Thanksgiving. So he thought he would have more value on the open market. I think the injury hurt him. And when he got out there, he realized it and figured familiarity and the same situation would be the best way to go for him and sort of go back on the market next year after you prove you're healthy and hopefully have another season. So I think that's the way he thought about it, and they finally came to terms. I think it's an important signing for the Eagles because even though they signed Leotis McKelvin in free agency and Brooks also, the other corner from Buffalo, there wasn't a lot of depth there, and this helps them immensely because now they have at least three guys when you add in Eric Rowe that can sort of be in the mix for those two starting spots.
John McMullen with us talking Eagles football. So, John, we've seen a lot of free agent moves, obviously last week, a little move today with the re-signing of Nolan Carroll. What do you think still on Howie's to-do list?
Well, I think they would still like to bring in a receiver. And I know they had interest in Andre Holmes, but he re-signed with Oakland, so he's off the table. There's not a lot of money left, so there's not going to be any splashy things. But you've seen after sort of that first flurry of those 2 days with the big name signings and the big money signings, now it's come down a little bit in the second phase of free agency, and you see more desirable deals from a team standpoint like Carroll. Minnesota signed Terrence Newman today, re-signed him. Same deal that Nolan Carroll got, 1 year possibility of $3 million. So you see the market not nearly what it was before, and now it's just about trying to find those diamonds in the rough. But when you look at this team specifically and you look at positions where they need help, one that is glaring is wide receiver. And they're not going to get a star by any stretch of the imagination, but they need to add at least a body with some experience to sort of be able to mentor those young guys.
John, I wanted to also talk about one semi-related Eagles subject. So Walter Thurmond, there's reports coming from Mike Florio, saying that there's rumors that Thurmond might retire, and then apparently Les Bowen says that he received a text from Thurmond. He asked Thurmond about it, didn't respond to him. Apparently Thurmond's got a lot of things outside of football that he can pursue, even though he's young in years in terms of age scale. In football terms, he's pretty much middle-aged.
Yeah, he is, but he's also been injured quite a bit before last season, so that was one of the knocks on him why he only got a one-year deal from the Eagles. So he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tire. I don't think from a football standpoint it's not like he's got nothing left. I think, and you're seeing this happen around the league more and more, B.J. Raji first saying he's retiring, now he's taking a hiatus. Calvin Johnson walking away at the apex of his career. He's a superstar. But all this is financially related, as you have these veteran players who, in Thurmond's case, had a very good season last year. People have been talking to him about a $4 million a year deal, and he feels he's worth more than that. So then what comes into it is that do you want to go through the grind for just $4 million when you feel you're worth more than that? For a guy like Walter Thurmond, as you mentioned, has a lot of outside interests, is into filmmaking, for instance, and things of that nature. He might just decide to walk away. I think it's a possibility, but I think it's financially motivated more than anything else, and the fact that he feels a little disrespected at the contract offers he's getting.
John, the Eagles fans love the free agency and they love moves and they seem to endorse them. But as we often see, winning moves in March don't necessarily lead to playing football in January. If you were to assess what the Eagles have done so far in this free agency period, how would you rate them or grade them for the moves that they've made?
Well, I think they've improved talent-wise at certain positions. There's no question about that. But you bring up a good point, Pete. And when I'm on stations around the country and everybody asks me winners and losers, every year for winners I say Green Bay. And the reason I say Green Bay is because they don't do anything in free agency. They never do anything. They just extend their own and sort of build through the draft like you're supposed to do. And you're right. You hit the nail on the head. The off-season winner is never the Super Bowl winner. Last year it was Miami in Indianapolis. How did it work out for them?
Horribly.
The year before it was the Dolphins again. Remember the Dream Team with the Eagles?
Oh, we remember.
Yeah, so making splashes in free agency is not how to win in this league. That said, they needed help at guard. They got one who projects to be certainly an improvement. They got a pretty good safety. So I think they've done a solid job, but it's people are always looking for those splashy signings. Be careful what you wish for because it never works in this league.
John, I wanted to ask you a couple things about news around the NFL. So C.J. Anderson today had signed a 4-year deal, $18 million with the Dolphins. Broncos seemed to very promptly match that deal to bring him back to Denver. What do you think was the story behind that? Because if Anderson was kind of seeing what his market value was, and it was only 4 at 18, it kind of makes you wonder if that's his cap. The Broncos may have gotten a deal out of this.
No, they didn't get a deal. In fact, John Elway made a big mistake. The reason his money isn't that much is because he was a restricted free agent. So John Elway could have gave him the top tender and saved about $5 million for what he's forced to spend. So a lot of people looked at that deal and said he's not going to match it because it's going to be embarrassing if he matched it. But to his credit, he stood up and he admitted a mistake. It didn't do what he was supposed to do, and it cost him a few $1 million. As you go through the system financially, exclusive rights free agents don't make as much as restricted free agents. Restricted free agents don't make as much as unrestricted. So that's where CJ was in the process. He was restricted. The Dolphins tried to put in the poison pill with a lot of money up front and hoped that Denver wouldn't match it. But as I said, John Elway, to his credit, you have to criticize him for not doing the right thing originally. But instead of making two mistakes, putting another one on top of it, he raised his hand, put his head down, and said, my fault, and they matched the offer and got him back.
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM. John, you talked about veteran receivers and a lot of guys going off the board. Mike Wallace, another one, as it looks like he signed with the Ravens. So who's left out there?
There's not many, and that's the problem. And Mike Wallace, there's another big name, though. There's a guy who probably wouldn't fit here anyway. So, and that's a name that probably would have sparked interest in the fan base. But he was a guy we just mentioned, the Dolphins. He was a guy 2 years ago that the Dolphins signed to a big money deal. Didn't work out there. They traded him to Minnesota. It didn't work out there. And the one thing he gives to you is deep speed down the football field. And that's obviously not a strength of Teddy Bridgewater or Ryan Tannehill. So the thought in Baltimore is Joe Flacco. Nobody throws a better deep ball than him. So he should fit in there, and I think it's a good fit for that team. I think it was a prudent signing. But for an organization like the Eagles, I don't think a guy like that is a good signing. So I don't blame them for not even have any interest in him or anything of that nature. And it's getting to the point where they might have to address that position in the draft again. And unfortunately, that means another young player to add to the mix of youth. And that's probably not the best case scenario, but that's where we are at this point.
Another guy that's been talked about in the NFL news, John, is Jason Pierre-Paul came out and said he's not going to wear a cast on his hand next year. He says that his hand will be fully functional for next year. Well, John, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I'm pretty sure that if you blow off some of your fingers, you lose some functionality of your hand. Is that just Pierre-Paul just trying to play it off to the media and to the fans?
Well, of course it is, because everyone saw him last year, and even though the athleticism was still there, and he would often be in position to make plays when he finally did come back, he had that big club on his hand he couldn't wrap up. So basically you just saw quarterbacks and running backs bouncing off him, and they keep moving. And there's a reason that a guy with that talent only got a 1-year deal to come back, because the Giants are in the same boat. They say, well, we can't sign this guy to a long-term deal because we don't know how this is going to affect him. And the fact that you don't have part of your thumb and your index finger, I mean, that's an issue. There's no question about it. He's not the same guy physically. Hopefully he can overcome it and prove he can still be successful on the field. But I think you can judge by the nature of what the Giants brought him back on, and that's a 1-year deal, that there are still serious questions moving forward on how he can perform.
News today, John, about an NFL official acknowledging a link between football and CTE for the first time. Jeff Miller speaking about that in front of a congressional committee. Is your reaction to that like, well, about time? What's your reaction to that?
No, I'm a little different than most. I think that's completely overblown news. The NFL has admitted a link for quite a long time, and I've had an opportunity to talk to Dr. Joe Maroon, who's the Steelers team physician. He's on the neck and spine board, and Dr. Berger in San Francisco, which created this entire storm because there was a series of articles that said he denied a link. He never denied a link. What he said, and people can find the transcripts online, what he said was he said repetitive head trauma causes CTE, causes tau disposition on the brain. There's no question about that. But there's got to be something else, because he himself, as a former football player, has tau on his brain, and he's a neurosurgeon. Chris Nowinski, for instance, the ex-WWE star who retired and is now a concussion advocate, he has it on his brain. But he's a very smart individual who goes about his business and is very productive in society. So what the doctor said is there has to be something coupled with head trauma that causes it. And the term denial is just not true. So I'm not sure why everyone's making such a big fuss about this, but it's been at least 4 or 5 years since the NFL acknowledged there's certainly a link.
You can follow John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. Also follow him at 97.3 ESPN.com, keeping you updated on all Eagles news, rumors, and important information. John, appreciate you joining us on the show today.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate it.